Started the show without clicking start, and go live. So we had to get this going quick. The topics tonight are going to be absolutely tremendous. I think the energy level is good. Dennis is amped up. I'm amped up. The topics for tonight, one of the things we're going to discuss is the T-Mobile self-branded 5G hotspot. I did the video today earlier, Dennis. I didn't get much feedback. There wasn't much commentary in the video itself. So maybe we'll get something more out of it here within the live stream. We'll see. That'll be something we'll touch on quickly. AT&T is doing 20 gig symmetrical fiber now. 20 gig, right? They just announced that they were going to be doing like 5 gig, and they're like instantly going 20 gig, which is nuts. So we'll discuss that, and we'll look at the story. And then we also have to talk about who's going to be bidding for Spectrum Auction 108, the 2.5 gigahertz auction for the rest of T-Mobile's N41. And the reason why I refer to it as T-Mobile's N41 is I kind of want them to have it all. I want them to have extensive, like most completely national, deep N41 channels for fixed wireless and mobile use and all of that. I just don't think anybody else should have it as long as T-Mobile's willing to build it out thoroughly. But there's a bunch of companies that have put in for bidding. They put in their applications and they're going in, and I don't know what their intentions are, but we can discuss it. What do you think of these topics, Dennis?
I think they're great. I see Zero Cool egging me on, and I kind of want to keep the same energy we're having about our behind the scenes conversation, just to start with that point. So I think we should go with AT&T 20 gig real quick.
Should we start there, Dennis?
I think so, because that's where the energy was at, and I don't want to lose my train of thought.
All right, let's do that. What I first want to do is I'm going to put a link for the story down in the live, and then whenever the show posts for DVR, it'll show up in the show notes too.
Yeah, so before we actually go to look at the actual 20 gig tier, I want to have a more broader conversation like we were having.
Do it, Dennis. Go ahead.
So, behind the scenes, we were having a bit of discussion, and I think the most important takeaway here is 20 gig is all well and good, but there are 4 main problems that the US has in my eyes when it comes to internet connectivity. And as you touched on, it's not necessarily raw capacity or the highest peak throughputs that can be attained here. The problems fall in these 4 categories: affordability, accessibility, availability, and whatever you would consider to be like maintaining or like peering, essentially. Like right now, I would say in a solid chunk of the US, you can get, and I'm using quotation marks, gigabit internet, like regular gig. But the reality is, for most people that have gig or higher than gig speeds, is that they're not actually really able to utilize it. Take Verizon, for example. They have arguably some of the worst peering agreements I would consider out of the big telecom companies. So oftentimes, because of how the traffic gets routed, you're never able to actually fully saturate your gigabit connection to even popular websites like Google, with like stuff like YouTube or Google Drive. Literally, I posted on Twitter and there was responses. Verizon was having an issue accessing Gmail, Sneed. Verizon was having peering issues with freaking Google. They are the internet.
The most basic thing of all, Google.
Yes. And then when we talk about like 20 gigs, like peak speeds or whatever from AT&T here, that goes about as far as where is it going to be available and what's the pricing going to be? Because if AT&T is going to come in hot at like $500, which is what I'm guessing, then no one's going to buy it. It's going to be just like Gig Pro from Xfinity. No one's going to buy 6 gig.
They're selling what, 2 gig for $129 or something?
You talking about AT&T?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, and then they're like $160 for 5 gig?
Something like that.
You think they're coming at like $249 or something for that?
No, it's gonna be like $500, man. It's gonna be like how Xfinity has Gig Pro, man. $320 for like 7 gig. Dude, they're gonna come in at like they gotta come in like $500 on that.
The technicals actually go back to hardware too. Like there's no like consumer grade equipment that's going to operate this.
Dude, even business equipment, literally the only equipment that I can conscientiously think of that would be able to use a 20
Tower
gig
site
connect.
gear.
Well, I was gonna say just enterprise gear in
Yeah, yeah.
general. So you're talking
Exactly.
like
That's enterprise. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
literally that's your Cisco's of the world. You're not even talking about Ubiquiti anymore. You're talking like literally like Cisco and who's the other big one besides Cisco? I'm blanking on the name right now, but you're literally talking like $10,000 equipment to be able to handle this kind of speed. um it's just wow. Like it's a wow moment for me because we talked about that one ISP over in Switzerland for like 65 USD. You were able to get 25 gig speed, and they were awesome enough to even, provide the equipment if necessary, if you needed to rent it for a fairly reasonable pricing. I don't see anybody getting this tier from AT&T, not for the next decade.
So
I
what is
mean,
this? Just a flex?
pretty much. It's like, dude, it's kind of like how we got like the lab reports of like, oh my god, we were able to push a petabyte of data in a lab environment over fiber, but like the reality is that's never gonna come to us as consumers for like another 100 years, right? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think this is like the same way.
I was talking to RF Waves earlier today, and me and him had the same sentiment. The focus should not be high capacity residential tiers. It should be expanding the fiber footprint. It should be getting it to more places. The fact that they're like, well, we already have fiber here. Let's go ahead and just increase the capacity, but it's not really changing anything for anyone.
Well, I mean,
What is
forget
game changing is going to be someone who previously only had DSL or had satellite or has crappy coax that hasn't had a reinvestment in infrastructure for 2 or 3 decades.
well, I mean, forget the expanding part for a second. Let's just focus on the actual part where AT&T focuses on resiliency and improving peering. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Sneed, but I do. It wasn't that long ago where we had that tragedy at one of AT&T's main,
Oh, the one in Tennessee?
yeah, the one in Tennessee at one of their co-locations that literally knocked out the internet for like half of the continental US because all the telecom ISPs were routing their traffic through that data center. Like, let's talk about that. How about we get more data centers for routing purposes so that both traffic can be routed more efficiently and so we can have a more resilient internet infrastructure. I mean, there are a lot of bottlenecks in our internet infrastructure that people don't realize, primarily because they can't see it, that if one thing goes wrong, you're literally talking about like 13 states going without internet regardless of the ISP that you have, and that's a problem.
Mhm.
Like, I'll give you an example. Over here on the East Coast, specifically like Pittsburgh area, if something was to happen to Comcast's iBone, you would literally knock out the internet for Verizon Fios, Layer 3, Cogent, CenturyLink, Armstrong, and Windstream, as well as other smaller cable operators like Blue Devil and everything else. All of them would be screwed. No internet because they all ultimately go into Comcast iBone for transit. Tell me how that's not a big problem.
Oh, it's a major problem.
But anyway, go ahead. We can focus on this point now if we want to kill off my preaching.
All right, so industry first, 20 gig symmetrical speed on production fiber network. The news came out of Dallas, so they're just saying, AT&T headquarters. It looks like they are trying to get out ahead of, future technologies, AR, VR applications, cloud gaming, connected cars, cities, video conferencing tools, just basically needing all this capacity. More and more sophisticated apps and services are going to require it. So they're willing to provide it. The increase in capacity, the lowered latency, fiber being the answer to all those things. I mean, if there was actually the name hypergig, wouldn't this be it? 20 gigabit symmetric speeds. They're the first operator in the world to achieve the milestone, it says. I thought we found something in like Sweden where they had like
Yeah, it's already been done, dude. There are literally places in the world, Snee, where I kid you not, that residential customers can get like 100 gig internet.
what was the one that we did in Sweden, Dennis?
It
What was the
was
provider?
I don't remember the name, but it was like something, and it was like $65, and it was like $65 USD. I'm sure I can
What was the
find it.
speed though? Do you remember?
25 gig.
25 gig. Okay. That's what I thought.
So faster than this. But this is the US we're talking about, so
Okay, well, it says first operator in the world, so they're wrong.
okay, well.
Yeah, so they're wrong. Journey to hypergig. My only issue is regardless of the technology, it says here, getting the 20 gigabits per second. AT&T doesn't offer hardware that can actually do this. Like they can't give you, I mean, what would you call it, Dennis? Just which gateway or something, whatever they send you, the modem, right? It's like a 2-in-1. It's a modem and router all in one. That thing, at least the one I have, I'm pretty sure it's only 2.5 gig.
So basically, Sneed, when you're talking about speeds at this level, you're talking about literally just having a switch. Because what you got to understand is when you start talking about enterprise gear, Sneed, so consumer hardware
Dennis,
is
wouldn't you be running fiber straight to the
right. You'd be
Yeah.
running fiber straight into a switch. So you would literally have an SFP plus port that is just straight up fiber into SFP plus connector into switch. And then switch would have literally like more SFP plus ports. Like you literally couldn't use RJ45 like you could not use an RJ45 connection for this. This would all just be straight fiber runs to be able to reliably achieve these kinds of speeds. You couldn't use RJ45.
So what they're doing, Dennis, they're just going to use some type of a new GS-PON technology that's going to double the throughput because currently I think they max out at 10 gig, which they offer to business. I don't think they offer to consumer, but that's essentially what they're going to be doing. I just don't understand, Dennis. Who's signing up for this?
Literally no one, but also Sneed, you asked me who the ISP was. I found it. It's called iNet7.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, no one's signing up for this. Like literally, I don't know what good stuff AT&T is smoking, but there's no next gen application that needs 20 gig internet, period. Because next gen applications are always going to be developed with the lowest common denominator in mind. And right now, if memory serves me, the average US speed based off Ookla's data has hovered somewhere around like 200 meg down and like I think it was like 15 up is what our like national like average is for considerations. And that's the average. And realistically speaking, no one's going to be developing anything that requires more than roughly like 50 meg throughput down and like 5 up. That's what I feel like next gen. I'm using quotation marks when I do this with my fingers.
Mhm.
That's what next gen is being developed for in mine is a 50 meg connection down and like 5 up. So this is really, really overkill. Literally not even 16K would even take a dent into that much bandwidth. And as mentioned, there's not going to be a single server on the face of this planet that could saturate that connection individually.
The first thing I thought about was, oh, this is a nice, business plan upgrade if a business could use it. And then I kept reading and it was like consumer. Like what?
It is. I'll tell you what it is, Sneed. It's the biggest waste of money. Whatever money AT&T is spending on that, they could have took to add like 100 extra homes with just regular gig.
That's my point. That is absolutely my point. We're talking about a company, an AT&T, that has literally shut down DSL on customers who have no other connection option. They shut it down, Dennis. So they have been putting money into increasing capacity for a need that doesn't exist versus the need that does exist for people that are losing DSL or have satellite. You see where I'm at with it?
I do.
Bummer, man. Whatever. Stupid. All right. Running 20 gig fiber to a tower site makes sense. Running 20 gig for an enterprise application makes sense. Operating a server and such.
Well, can I just say, here's another thing that irks me about this. The fact that it's being sold to residential customers means it's applicable to AT&T's residential terms of service, which means you couldn't run a server off that internet.
Yeah, which
And
is ridiculous. What would be the actual purpose for a 20 gig connection, Dennis?
well, the purpose for a 25 gig connection would be running a server. So that could be a speed test ookla server. That could be literally hosting multiple websites in a VM box. Stuff like that would be why you would use that kind of bandwidth, and all of those things are prohibited in AT&T's terms of service for residential customers.
I would literally have to read the terms of service on this specific deal. There's no way the same terms for the 1 gig service apply to the 20 gig service. No way. It makes absolutely no sense. You know what I'm saying, Dennis? It seems counterproductive, you know? All right. Well, let's go ahead and transition over to this next one. I posted this in the live chat for those that are here during the live stream. And I got very little feedback and interaction on the story earlier today. I'm starting to think, Dennis, that nobody was asking for this. The
Ding,
T-Mobile
ding, ding.
self-branded 5G hotspot. I don't think anyone cares.
Yep. You hit the nail on the head. I talked about this yesterday on the best phone plans because it was brought up by I think it was Josh that might have brought it up, maybe, or I can't remember who brought it up to us. But anyway, my whole takeaway from this was T-Mobile makes pretty bad hardware, so it's nothing to be excited about. B, when it comes to hotspot, you can't see me holding it up, but the best hotspot on the go is your phone. And C, the pricing for this is stupid. Like,
Well, okay, so then let's go into the pricing. Let's go into the bands and stuff. All right, so the first thing that you want to know is this is specifically catered to the T-Mobile network. All right, N71, which is 600 megahertz, the low band 5G, extended range 5G, and then the ultra capacity 5G, the 2.5 gigahertz N41, that's on there too. That's really the only thing you need to know with this device because the rest of it's not there. There's no CBRS, there's no C-band, there's no millimeter wave. They made this thing to literally be as cost effective as possible and have the two main activity channels on 5G for T-Mobile. So you're not getting this, buying this, and taking it to another carrier, literally for the T-Mobile application.
which is fine, by the way, because I know Ricky on Twitter was talking about that, but for T-Mobile's use case, it's whatever.
Well,
But
right, exactly. You're like you have to just keep that in mind. It's not like the Netgear Nighthawk, how it's got every band that's here in North America. You know what I mean? This is a situation where it was made and produced for the T-Mobile use case where somebody comes in and could get this thing essentially for free on 2 years if they needed a 50 or a 100 gig hotspot. I mean, like Dennis, you're talking about the phone. This thing's got to have better antennas, right? Than a
I mean,
phone.
my whole thing was, and this is the part, it's the plans. You
The
got
plan
50
sucks.
gigs and 100 gigs for this plan, right? I feel like at some point here in the semi near future, T-Mobile will up Magenta MAX's hotspot to 50 gigs. If you have 50 gigs on your phone line, why would I buy this dedicated hotspot device for 50 gigs? And then the 100 gig pricing, from what I recall, isn't that competitive. Like, basically what I'm saying is that I don't find dedicated hotspots to be filling the same kind of role that they used to. Because if you're at home and you want to use a cellular network for your internet, you buy T-Mobile's home internet product. If you're on the go and you have limited pocket space, if you're really gonna carry this extra hotspot device with you, it needs to provide like meaningful internet connectivity on the go, like a meaningful amount of data for it to be the right use case for that specific person. Otherwise, I'm of the opinion like for the most people, 50 gigs of hotspot on your normal phone is going to do you just fine when you're in a pinch. Like, why carry this extra device that is arguably going to be subpar compared to the latest antenna that's packed into like your S22 Ultra, for example?
So with this particular device, I was kind of like thinking about it like how you said the plan. I think a 50 gig hotspot plan should probably cost $20 a month. I think 100 gigs should be $30 a month. For $50, we should be getting 200 or 250 gigs of data. T-Mobile could have capitalized on a huge uncarrier announcement. 250 gigs of data for $50. 500 gigs of data for, I don't know, $75. Bro, this is essentially like if you think about the T-Mobile home internet, fixed wireless access, right, Dennis? What does the average fixed wireless access customer use for data per
I
month?
believe it's like 500 gigs.
So why didn't they get it near that? 300, 500 gigs. It would essentially be the T-Mobile home internet, but you can charge more. You could charge $60. You could charge $70, right? Because it's not fixed, it's mobile. So you're willing to do the fixed wireless access where people are using over a terabyte. You know what I mean? And then, but you're not cool with giving people a little bit more. It's mobile. I mean, nobody's going to be killing one tower site in 90% of the times, you know? Like if there were like 5 million customers who took advantage of one of these plans, like this is completely hypothetical. If you made a 300 gig tier, I don't know how many people would get it, Dennis. You think 1 million people?
If you made a 300 gig tier,
Yeah, a 300 gig hotspot tier.
maybe less than that.
Maybe less. I mean, it's not going to kill your network, but you could generate money. People would pay 50, 60, $70 for it, and they'd be happy to pay it.
I mean, the people that would want that kind of usage would probably pay $100 for it, to be honest. Like, you could make real ARPU off of something like that. But this, to me, is stupid. Like, honestly, if T-Mobile was worried about congestion anyway, you know what they could have did, Sneed? Do like
The
100
speed.
gigs at high speed, like just unthrottled, right? And then after the 100 gigs, give them like 10 meg, like what Visible does with the hotspot. At least that's usable, and call it like $40.
I think there's people willing to pay 50. You know, like 40 is very fair. I think people are willing to pay 50
Yeah.
because they're paying 50 for the fixed wireless for home.
Yeah, but not 2G speed throttles like what happens when you
No,
use
no, no. I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I think you bumped down the price a little bit. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This thing is made by Inseego. I guess the model is the M2000.
Which,
They got some
side note,
other.
Inseego, not necessarily what I would deem a quality.
I think it was price, Dennis. They definitely were thinking, what's the cheapest way for us to get our 5G bands on a tethering, or excuse me, on a hotspot?
Yeah, but if you actually look at what it's retailing for, isn't it like $250 or something?
No, like
So
$349.
it's not even cheap. That's what I'm like getting at. Like, it's not even like a cheap.
Oh no, the new hotspot's 200. My bad. $200.
Wait, no. It's 336. Scroll down. Whoa. Stop. The Inseego's device's full price is 336 versus the new hotspot of 198. What does that mean?
Yeah, this one is 198.
This one's 198.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I just know that hotspots generally aren't affordable. I guess this one is more affordable, but like, I don't know. I know that I'm not the person that would buy it. Because like I said, if I'm on the go and I really need a hotspot, the thing that's going to be with me is my phone. I'm not going to be carrying this unless it's a conscientious decision. It's just another thing to worry about, and I don't feel like the pricing makes sense. I don't
Dennis,
feel like
why do you think neither, like any of the carriers, not Verizon, not AT&T, not T-Mobile, and especially I think this is I don't understand how T-Mobile hasn't done this yet. Why have they not uncarriered the mobile hotspot? Why have they quote unquote uncarriered, fixed wireless access and home internet? They've uncarriered unlimited data for mobile. They've uncarriered Netflix on us and text and fees. They've uncarriered so many different things. Why are these companies unwilling to do anything with a hotspot, like a 300 gig hotspot or a 250 gig hotspot? None of them want to touch this.
Do you want to know the actual answer, Steen?
Yeah.
It's because with the T-Mobile home internet, if you noticed, they can control the actual hardware that goes on the network. You can't take like a T-Mobile home internet SIM out of the T-Mobile home internet and just use it on whatever, as far as I'm aware. However, With a mobile hotspot SIM, it's a different story. You could unplug that data SIM from that hotspot and put it into things that aren't officially supported to really abuse the network in a meaningful way. And I think that's the kind of the reason behind it. They're afraid of network abuse because it's happened before. And they don't have necessarily the measures in place to prevent such a thing from happening or the level of granular control that's necessary for network management. And I don't think we'll see something like that happen until the 5G standalone core comes.
Franco chimed in with a super chat. Thank you for that and appreciate it very much. Typical T-Mobile move, solving a problem that doesn't exist, creating a new one that isn't needed. Interesting. The first thing I thought, and this is why I titled my video earlier, who was asking for this? Because they didn't bring a new plan. The hardware to me doesn't really matter. Nobody said, "Oh, we need better hardware from these hotspots." People don't even really like the hotspot plans. They're not even that great. I think this would have been a nice opportunity, and they could still do this in the future, where they could explore higher capacity plans. I think that would be huge. And come on, man, they brag about all this 5G capacity they've created, and they simply do not allow these crucial use cases. You know, out there, Dennis, there are RVers. There are people traveling for the summer who would love something like this at a higher than 100 gig threshold. I think 100 gig is a good entry point. I'd like to see a 2 or 300, man. 250 or something, right? I don't know. All right, so big shout out to Franco, and then one more. This one from MS. We got the branding here now. Appreciate it. He said the old one is the Encigo. The new one is by Quanta Cisco. Well, they did solve one price point, I suppose, by making it cost less, I guess. Is that good, Dennis?
I mean, sure, I guess.
Not inspired, huh?
I mean, look, man, I'm gonna keep it 100. Like, the only time I care about my hotspot data is in 3 scenarios. One is if my home internet goes down, which I have 2 home internet providers for that reason. 2 is when I'm doing something like I did when I flew out to Colorado to see Stetson / Carlos in Vegas. That's probably the one time in the whole year where I was like, wow, I'm really happy to have a lot of hotspot data because I needed it for like schoolwork and stuff. And then the third is just like if I'm in a real pinch or maybe I want to do just something fun, like play my Nintendo Switch on the go or something. Other than that, my hotspot data generally goes unused, and the 40 gigs that I have on the Magenta MAX plan or the 40 on the AT&T Elite plan, generally speaking, are already more than plenty for me. And generally speaking as well, unless I'm somewhere that has like I'm talking real bandwidth, like 5G ultra wideband UC or something like that. Generally speaking, I don't find the hotspotting experience to actually be that great on any wireless carrier's network because it's bottom of the barrel priority.
It's all QCI 9 and stuff like that.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
I generally don't find it to be a very pleasant experience unless I'm somewhere where there's just like an infinite amount of capacity.
Millimeter wave,
Right.
something like that. All right, good stuff, Dennis. You ready for this next one?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right, man. This one is the big one. This one, I think it brings up some good talking points, and I'm excited to hear your take on it. Might get spicy. Who knows? We shall see. All right, so this is the AT&T Verizon potentially shaking things up in the 2.5 gigahertz auction. For those of you that don't know about what's up and coming, this is happening in July. If I remember correctly, it was July 20 something, 20th, 21st, for whatever reason sticks in my mind. We'll see if the article covers it here. But this is essentially the white space licenses for T-Mobile's N41. I've already made this very, very clear. I want contiguous coverage of spectrum for each carrier. I don't like the chopped up and spit out version of all these blocks of spectrum. You know, like take for example, the spectrum swaps. Those kind of clean things up. But like most of the time, what we see with like the 700 megahertz frequency, N41's another example of this, where like colleges and institutions and churches have these licenses, and this goes back to the FCC, and I get all of that, but I just want things to be cleaned up, and I want spectral efficiency. I want companies to be able to build out their networks with the greatest potential possible. I don't want things that are gonna just get in the way and make it worse than it could be, because the more contiguous the connectivity is, the better the experience is for the customers. And Dennis, you're like me, we're consumer advocates. We just want what's better. But this is going to be structured as of an auction where anybody could get in and outbid someone and it's theirs. So now we know that there are probably, I don't know, there's probably going to be like 10 to 20 different applicants who are going to be in on this auction and able to get the spectrum. So T-Mobile's going to have competition, guys. Oh, okay. It says July 29th. That was a little bit off. But it is auction 108. So as of right now, AT&T and Verizon have submitted applications to participate in the auction, which is largely seen as a chance for T-Mobile to fill in its vast 2.5 gigahertz footprint. All right, Dennis, Dish is in there, AT&T is in there, Verizon's in there. Out of those mentioned entities, who is most likely to go in there and disrupt T-Mobile's parade?
Dish.
Oh, I did not expect you to say Dish.
I am being serious.
Give me your rationale, man. Tell me about it.
Well, if we think about it for a second, Dish, while they do have a decent amount of spectrum, a good amount of it's going to require some additional work to be actually usable for terrestrial use. And also, there's been a lot of issues that I feel like Dish and Charlie has been aware of when it comes to some of the different frequencies that have been out there. So I feel like they'd want to scoop up some 2.5, considering the whole C-band fiasco that happened, because they know that would be easy and quick to deploy, and likely cheap to deploy too. And I think that Dish is going to want to get in there because I think they're going to be able to get a fire sale on it, because I don't actually think AT&T and Verizon will be big players, and T-Mobile tends to be cheap when it comes to how they want to buy their spectrum. And I think Dish would be willing to scoop it up because they see the value of even just sitting on it in the event as having leverage over T-Mobile when it comes to negotiating roaming agreements or forcing T-Mobile to basically pay them to lease it off of them.
And so here's my process on this. If I had to pick a carrier who's most likely to get involved, I kind of like your angle, Dennis. I'll give it to you. I think there's some warrant to kind of what you're saying. But if it's going to be like who's actually going to use the spectrum, I would say Dish would actually put up gear for it and actually use it. But I think AT&T and Verizon would be least likely to actually put up radios and antennas for it. I think the only way they get involved is if they're going to just lease it to T-Mobile and become the owner of it.
I
And
also have
then,
a small disagreement with you on that.
okay, well, let me finish.
Okay.
And then you can, hit me with the disagreement. I think just based on the way things played out in C-band, and if you remember, T-Mobile was like kind of playing that game before the C-band auction. Oh yeah, we know that AT&T and Verizon are going to kill themselves for this. They're going to destroy their balance sheets for this spectrum, and we're going to be there to kind of be a disruptor and force them to have to raise up the pricing. I think this is an opportunity for the Death Star and Big Red to kind of pay back that favor. What do you think?
I agree with you on that sentiment, but I also think that AT&T specifically would actually have some interest in the 2.5 to like actually use, because of the fact that there are still to this day issues going on with the FAA when it comes to C-band around airports.
Yeah, but those zones have kind of shrunk a little bit.
Oh no, Sneed. They downpowered over here in Pittsburgh, man. There is I've heard rumors that there has been conversations that the FFA has been having without the FCC being present at the table, so to speak. So it's still an ongoing problem.
Wow, that's interesting because that contradicts the information I'm getting internally at the big red carrier.
Dude, I mean, I talked to Carlos a lot. He's been experiencing similar issues with Verizon being forced to down tilt and down power their sites because the FAA is still raising a stink.
Now that I believe, I mean, I see it all the time. There's always stories popping up about the FAA, but all I'm shocked about is why they have tried to stay away from the airports, I think just in good faith, and that they don't want the pushback and the
Yeah, but
negative
this isn't
pub.
a good faith thing anymore. This is literally like even if it's in the path of an airplane, I'll just say there's some tomfoolery afoot. I can't get into too much detail on the live stream, but let's just say the FAA is still a thorn
Yeah. Yeah,
in the
definitely.
wireless provider sides, and I feel like because of that, AT&T, if they wanted to or deemed it so, they would I feel like they would be more likely to get in on it, mainly because if you think about AT&T's network strategy, they've always had a tendency to not put their eggs all in one basket, right? Like you were talking about contiguous spectrum, that's Verizon's game. AT&T is the opposite. They're like, nah, we'll take a little bit of AWS here, and we'll take a little bit of PCS there, and we'll take a little bit of, you know, that's been like AT&T's approach, and then do like 8-way carrier aggregation, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't feel like it would be too far of a stretch for AT&T to do something like that. Plus, remember how you were talking about how Dish would be likely to deploy it? Think about AT&T's relationship with Dish and what having that spectrum might mean for their relationship with Dish.
I don't know, man. The way I'm feeling about this particular auction, and what's going on with C-band and the FAA, if that is true and that's indeed the case, then it brings up the value of the spectrum and it pushes T-Mobile to have to pay more for it. And let's keep in mind that these are not places where the big MNOs like AT&T and T and Verizon are doing anything substantial for fixed wireless access or major capacity. Like, this is not a situation where Verizon wants to hang antennas and radios in these minimal locations. Like, Dennis, geographically speaking, I don't know how much this covers the US, but the white space licenses are not extensive. Truth be told, T-Mobile has most of the nation covered with N41. Like 80, 100, 140 megahertz, 160 megahertz of it. They have it, but it's these like specific locations. And this is why I mentioned Verizon as kind of being more of a candidate. If they do anything, it's going to be just leasing it to T-Mobile, and then same thing for AT&T. I see them wanting to just lease it to them. I don't see them actually hanging up gear. And I see T-Mobile spending a lot of money and being willing to spend. They don't want to lose the opportunity to fill out their coverage map with this stuff.
You don't
And then
see
the last thing here that I think is definitely like, and this is where I go, like if it's maybe 90% of the licenses go to T-Mobile, I think there will be some wireless ISPs who want to do some fixed wireless access stuff and might be able to pull it off and get like 20 megahertz of it and build, these cell sites and connect people on fixed wireless access on these channels. And if they get 40 megahertz of it, they can create a few hundred megabits per second and sell it.
so you don't see AT&T or Verizon, for example, buying it specifically as a way to leverage a spectrum swap,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
example.
that's something I could see. Yeah, to try to get some C-band back out of it, I could see that. What do you think?
Yeah, I could see that as another angle. All I'm trying to touch on to play devil's advocate with you is that I can justify reasons for why I could see AT&T or Verizon bidding. Do I put or like meaningfully bidding? But do I put that as super likely? No. I still lean on Dish being the biggest disruptor. In fact, I can see Dish. I'm not even joking with you, Sneed. I could see Dish cleaning up about 50% of the available licenses if they were feeling brazen enough.
Pete says one thing to consider about the auction, it isn't exactly nationwide. The big markets are a lot of empty. Expect half of the empty areas to be Dish.
So
That's
Pete
from
agrees with
Pete.
me about 50% then.
Yeah. Super chat from MS. Add a spike clause. Must deploy within 1 year or forfeit. I don't know, man. I don't know about clauses. I mean, we could probably generate some awesome clauses. I
Well,
just don't know.
I'll make a hot take, Sneed.
Thanks for the super chat, MS. Appreciate you, man.
I'll make a hot take, Sneed, real quick.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
feel like after this auction's over, if T-Mobile does get a clean sweep on it, I feel like T-Mobile should be barred from the next Spectrum auction.
Which would be for the 3.1,
Yes.
which I think is 100 plus megahertz, I think.
Yes.
So you want them out of that one. They can't even partake.
Correct.
Sheesh, man.
No, dude, I'm being serious. If T-Mobile goes,
Yeah, I know, but they don't, like, the FCC doesn't want anybody barred.
I know, but if they get a clean sweep on this, right, what would that push T-Mobile's total mid-band holdings to?
300. I mean, what do they got? They would have 160 plus PCS, AWS, so 200, 240, 260. They'd be approaching 300 with another auction. And mid-band.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
in comparison, how much does AT&T have?
They'd be, at that point in time, they'd be just crossing 200 probably.
And lastly, how much would Verizon have?
Maybe 240, 260.
It's not as far of a difference as I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying is they'd still be up about 60 to 80 megahertz, which is pretty substantial, Dennis.
I thought AT&T only has access to so they got 40 and 40 right now from the C-band, and then
The C-band situation, they're gonna have either 80 or 100. It's gonna be mostly in the nation. It's gonna be 80 megahertz. You know, it's gonna be 80 of the 3.7 plus the 40 puts them at 120.
So
They
where
got
are you getting the other 80 from?
Well, there's 20 in PCS. There's 20 in AWS.
Okay, so
Right.
that's
So yeah. So and then you gotta, I guess, count them in for the 3.1 that they'll get some. You know, I'm
well,
counting
I'm
them
just
in.
saying before 3.1. So 160,
Oh, okay. Now I get what you're. Okay, so you want to say like before the next auction? Okay,
right. So
gotcha.
160 for AT&T. What's Verizon have?
Verizon,
Yeah.
160 average on the C band. Uh, AWS and PCS give them 30. You know, so put them at like 200. But they do have CBRS in some places where it's like 30 or 40. That's the one thing AT&T doesn't have, so they're over 200.
Okay, so Verizon, we'll just call it 200, AT&T 160. T-Mobile has, you said they would be pushing 300.
They have like, because of Sprint, they have like 40 megahertz at PCS national.
So they have like 300, right?
200, 240, 260. They're probably closer to 280.
All right,
Yeah.
so 280 versus 200 and 160. Now do you see the problem of why I want them barred for the next auction?
I mean, but they're willing to spend. I mean, it's hard to tell them not to. Like, you know, look, I know you're gonna kind of swing towards socialist dentist in a second, but like, it's hard to have a principle and a philosophy of an FCC that says highest bidder wins when you're gonna block out a company. I personally believe that if the carriers care enough, they won't let another company outbid them in a position of strength.
Yes, but we've also seen the FCC do like
Look, Dennis,
guarantee.
this is my hot take, okay? This is the honest truth. I'm telling you how I really feel. If you either have to 100% regulate the spectrum or you have to let it 100% be open auction. There's no 50-50. Like what you're doing right now is you're going to try to control how much spectrum a carrier can have after you said nobody's here to control how much a carrier can have. See, it's like pulling the reins on something that you said we don't want to have reins on it. You get what I'm saying? And I get what you're saying. You're trying to create parity. You want to see balance and equity. I'm just saying that's a slippery slope, you know?
I get that, but I will just say it's not unprecedented. We have seen the FCC limit who was available in certain specific auctions or set minimums on like how much spectrum can be purchased by a respective entity. Like we have seen stuff like that happen before. And at the very least, maybe they could do something like that for the next auction. It says like T-Mobile can't bid on the first round, for example, of like 80 megahertz to ensure that at least 80 megahertz gets into the hands of someone that isn't T-Mobile. Because what I don't want to happen is essentially what happened back in the LTE era, where we had a duopoly of AT&T, Verizon being the only low band holders, and that really suffered and impacted T-Mobile's ability to compete until they got their 600 megahertz license of band 71. If you remember, like
Yeah.
T-Mobile literally wasn't able to compete. And I feel like we're seeing a repeat of that happen before our eyes. Like if T-Mobile is able to say push 400 megahertz worth of midband, okay, and then Verizon and AT&T only can push say like 302 something respectively, that is going to give such a night and day difference advantage to T-Mobile's growth potential and how many subscribers they can support, as well as all the different use cases that we always talk about with 5G, that it's not even going to be a competition. I mean, we can argue small cells, would make up that difference, but to get to that point would require years and years and years of deployment. And we already know that market share in the eyes of the consumer is something that's really hard to change. T-Mobile's been still struggling with that change of mindset in the consumer's eyes for up to this point, right?
All right, we got some super chats here. Let's get to those real quick before I forget them. The first one from Pete. He said, I'd upgrade to the AT&T 5 gig service, but would rather support the SMT. Thanks, Pete. That's really nice of you. And appreciate the support and the kind words, man. It's really, really awesome. And then this other one is from Green. $5 super chat. Just got 5G plus in my area, getting 500 to 600 meg down, 40 to 50 up. Very nice, Green. You are spoiled as I am. We got all types of upgrades going on around us, and it's fun to have all that capacity at our fingertips. Very nice. Appreciate the super chats, guys. Did I miss any other ones?
Josh came in with a comment that was saying 160 megahertz and then T-Mobile 300 megahertz.
How'd you do that math? Oh, I see what he's saying. He's saying AT&T and Verizon's 160 is greater than T-Mobile's 300, meaning he says AT&T and Verizon do it better.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. So, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. I think he's just making his general statement for his experience. So Dennis, the situation with like Spectrum and auctioning, I'm a school teacher. You know my profession, man. All we care about, well, I could say for me, I try to be fair to every kid. I don't try to take, show favoritism or anything like that. So when I look at these types of situations, I don't want to show favoritism to T-Mobile, because of the structure of these auctions. It's literally in the mission, the highest bidder gets awarded the Spectrum licenses.
Yeah,
But
but
I'm so sick of the disjointed nature of the spectrum. I feel like the FCC is culpable to some of this, right?
yeah, but in your analogy as a teacher, when you see it, there's the kid that's like struggling a little bit. You tend to give them a little bit of extra attention, but you give them a little bit of extra support so they don't just fall through the cracks and fail out the class, right? In the same vein, T-Mobile right now, for all
Yeah, but I
intents,
can't look at AT&T like the kid that needs help. Like that's a tough way to look at that analogy and say, well, let's help AT&T. I mean, how should we help a company that literally was so greedy they tried to buy and control media? Like, come on, let's talk about Time Warner. Like, that was literally one of the greediest things of all time. They wanted to own DirecTV, they wanted satellite, and they wanted media, and they wanted wireless, and they wanted wireline. This is a company that said, we don't need the government regulating us. There's a letter at AT&T HQ in Dallas, where if you walk in the building, you read the letter, and it literally is from when AT&T was broken up by Judge Green back in the 80s. And essentially it's like, how dare the government try to tell us how to run our business? Bro, I mean, is there any worse monopoly of a company in the US that dates back into the 1800s? They've literally been like this for a long time. I find it really hard to feel bad for them that they don't have enough spectrum. That's on them. They could have bid on more spectrum in 3.7. Verizon just took them to the cleaners.
Let
That's
me
on them.
let me
The
ask
fact
you.
that they got 40 megahertz of 3.45 because that's all they could get. That's their decision
Let
that
me
they went light on 3.7.
let me ask you a very extreme question. Would you be feeling the same way if Verizon, for example, wasn't able to get any additional mid-band spectrum in your market? If what Verizon has right now as far as spectrum holdings, if that's all they could get for the foreseeable future, because T-Mobile and AT&T clean sweep in the next
Okay,
auction.
well, I can reposition this for Verizon too. Why didn't they get more AWS? Why'd they let Dish get all that spectrum in the last two AWS auctions? What business did Dish have getting all that spectrum? They weren't even operating a cellular network. It's just holdings. So shame on Verizon. Shame on Lowell McAdam, their former CEO, who said that's enough when it wasn't. The carrier that had the most customers should not have the same amount of spectrum as the carrier that has the least customers. Let's talk about that, right? Verizon bought what they thought was enough AWS nationally. Dish bought the same amount as Verizon. How is that possible? And how about the fact that even after that, what was Verizon's pivot? They had to wait for another mid-band auction, and you better believe they regret that because they have done nothing but split their cells to the freaking highest order of any company in metropolitan networking. Literally, they're putting macros and small cells everywhere, trying to deal with their congestion until now getting C-band relief. It's going to help them a lot. But yeah, I can put the shoe on the other foot, Dennis. Verizon is the architect of their congestion, right? And AT&T is the architect of their weak mid-band holdings. And T-Mobile has been the beneficiary of a 5G stimulus by consuming Sprint. It's been an absolute perfect storm for T-Mobile. And it's not their fault. They've taken advantage. That's what a company should do if you get the opportunity. And I'm not here to defend T-Mobile. I'm just calling a spade a spade. Verizon, it was on them. AT&T, it's on them. And T-Mobile did what they had to do. And actually, we're in a better position as a consumer when it comes to networking. It's the companies are fiercely building out networks.
Yeah, I just get worried when one person gets an unsurmountable lead, because in the same way, I'm going to use an example. So when AMD came out with Ryzen and people were happy that Intel was floundering, people were so excited. And then years rolled by, and then AMD started raising prices on their CPUs and became hard to come by, right? And now they're just as expensive, if not more expensive, than the Intel offerings in almost every category. I feel like T-Mobile was going to have a similar situation where T-Mobile's going to be like, yeah, we've had enough. We don't need to do any more promos. We can raise our prices to be Verizon expensive because we have more capacity already on air. And, all we have to do now is flip a switch. We got this extra 2.5. We already got the equipment up. Boom, it's there. Oh, we got this little bit of extra spectrum too. Boom, it's there. Once you start that snowballing effect, it gets really hard to catch back up, especially if you're always at spectrum deficit. Like, you talked about Verizon, splitting cells. Yeah, and it's because they made a mistake. Um, but I don't want to see Verizon get put into another situation, or AT&T get put into a situation where literally their only way to compete or to try to alleviate congestion is through millimeter wave spectrum holdings. This midband is, for all intents and purposes for our country, is probably going to be the best thing that most Americans see for the next decade, maybe even two. based off of how quickly millimeter wave is being rolled out and and how millimeter wave coverage has been being seen as far as distance and range goes.
Well, we do have 3.1 coming. 12 gigahertz is going to shift around, and who knows what's going to happen with that satellite frequency. But I don't know, man. I feel like these companies are the architects of their futures. Like what they've done in the past, they have to be held responsible for. Like any type of bailout or support doesn't make any sense in the basic premise of competition. Like if one competitor has made good decisions, they should reap the benefits of those good decisions, and the companies that have made bad ones, they should they should be hurt by that. And I know it's going to impact the customer in the long term, but that's we tell people tough nuggets all the time. You put your hand on the fire and you get burned. You take a chance and it doesn't pay out and you pay the price. So I find it really hard, with the exception of a company that's coming in as a new entrant. Like I would believe in boosting Dish's opportunities. As long as they build the network, I believe they should get a 5G stimulus. Just like T-Mobile got a 5G stimulus. AT&T and Verizon don't deserve 5G stimuli. I mean, in that essence, you know what I mean? Like like they were literally the two most dominant companies in wireless, and I mean, it was horrible for a long time, Dennis. We were on tiered plans and buckets and no unlimited and super high pricing and all this other stuff. T-Mobile gets a chance to come in and disrupt, and they do it, and they capitalize. Dish coming in, hopefully they can find some traction and stuff. I would I would like to see some of that actually happen. I don't want to see additional support for AT&T and T and Verizon. And I don't want to see additional support for T-Mobile either. Believe you me, Dennis, I'm with you there. I would like to see something that could help Dish a little bit.
I agree with you that Dish could use a little bit of help because we need a strong fourth competitor. But I'd also just say, like, I think the genesis of our problem is that this spectrum, you know how you view it, like how the companies own it. In my eyes, the way I look at it is spectrum is a public resource that we're allowing exclusive use towards for these companies to use. And in my eyes, when it comes to competition of like competition between the companies, when it comes to like making smart decisions, I'm of the personal opinion that there are other ways to differentiate yourselves than being spectrum starved. Like I want them all to have reliable, fast networks for the sake of quality infrastructure in the US for a resiliency standpoint and a redundancy standpoint. And I want the unique factors to be how they maximize the use of that spectrum resource, how they do their network management, what features they support, what services they offer on it, and not just strictly it be like a game of, well, this company has more spectrum, they win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's never been the case, right? Like having a lot of spectrum has never ensured anything because Sprint had the most spectrum for a long time. They were the weakest. They were the only national provider that was actually regional, like for the last 5 years. Like even T-Mobile like had more square mile coverage than Sprint, which is crazy, right? But Sprint had certain coverage in certain places where T-Mobile didn't. So that was a good acquisition for them. But like I don't know, the way I'm kind of looking at this, Dennis, and to kind of like bring this all round and about, kind of coming back to it, the carriers need capacity. The only thing we should be looking at as an FCC, as the American people, is we just want them to build. The spectrum licenses in and of themselves are like bullets in guns. The tower sites are guns. That's the way I've always looked at it. Like we need a tighter grid. We need more tower sites being built. I think that's a measure of a quality network, is having more tower sites, properly tuned, good gear, good engineering teams. Like even to this day, Dennis, what really makes well in most people's eyes, what makes Verizon such a reliable carrier? It's attention to detail. I personally believe that when I look at the engineering teams here in Cleveland, for example, my market, there is a noticeable difference between Verizon engineers and T-Mobile engineers. The T-Mobile engineers have gotten better. The network has gotten better, but clearly T-Mobile has way more spectrum, but the Verizon network is still more reliable here. The tower sites have backup power. The sites are generally better tuned. The SINAR, right? The signal quality is cleaner. There's millimeter wave. There's more small cells. It's just better here. Or else I would have left, guys. I would have left a long time ago and saved money. But there is a measurable and noticeable difference, right? So clearly, it's not just about spectrum, right, Dennis? It's really about properly engineering. And this goes back to like Verizon 1.0, where they were just going to engineer the best network and nobody was going to compare. The Sprint and AT&T and T-Mobile were just never in the same league. Now we could say there's parity because the capacity and people are using mostly data and calling doesn't matter and all of that. But that's kind of how I'm looking at it, is the best networks are always going to rise to the top. The cream rises to the top, and it's not just spectrum. If Verizon feels like their spectrum position is good after those auctions, I don't need, them to get more if they don't feel compelled to do it. That's on them. That's their decision. In my opinion, I think they're foolish. I think they should get more because they're doing fixed wireless access, right?
Well, Sneed, can I just come in real fast? Remember how we were talking about how you would love to have Dish have a 5G stimuli to actually encourage like something good? Let me throw out
Yeah.
just another hot take real quick. What if we barred all three of the big MNOs from participating and open the next auction up to just like Dish and other operators to try to do something unique? Maybe a Comcast, maybe a Spectrum, maybe insert your wireless wisp pumpkins in those regional areas. I'm just saying, like,
I have one problem with that, Dennis. And these carriers put spectrum on air. They do create capacity. They do build out the network. So it'd be hard for me to take that away from them since they are willing to build. But I think that in certain applications and use cases where there's like not a good setup of like home ISPs, I like the proposal of getting more of the wireless ISPs involved.
it doesn't even have to be the whole thing, but like just for like the first round, like 60
Isn't that what they did
megahertz.
with CBRS though?
I think so.
Yeah, and that's been a debacle, dude. Like the power levels. I mean, I blame the DoD for most of that. The FCC and the DoD should have. And look, this is actually we could do a whole freaking episode on the entire 3 gigahertz frequencies from the 3.1, the 3.4, the 3.7, the 3.55 with CBRS. Literally, the DoD should have just completely given up the entire 3 gigahertz frequency set. And then we could have full power everything. The fact that CBRS is so restricted, that's a thorn in our side because the wireless ISPs could be operating at full power. Mobile network operators could be operating at full power. And literally the DoD has so much control of so much spectrum. What do they care? We like, this is terrible. Satellite operators, like that should have been cleared and repacked 2-3 years ago. The fact that we're still talking about early clearance from Verizon, that's a pain. So that's my bigger problem with stuff like that. I think you have a great idea and that more businesses should be involved in this, but the power levels have been a restriction for sure.
Yeah. I just know that right now, and you can disagree with me if you want, but right now, I don't feel like the wireless market is in a healthy state. I know you think there's more competition than ever. I actually lean towards there's been more concentration than ever, and that competition has essentially died between
Yeah,
the
but
MNOs.
but you're talking about like recency bias because of price increases and stuff like that. But a year ago, you wouldn't have said this.
True. That
And
that
then
is
networking wise, you can't make that argument.
true. Well,
Dennis,
I
I'm
sh-
watching AT&T put up N77 on every Verizon site that has N77 and N41.
but I can make the argument that T-Mobile slowed down their build out. I can
No,
make the
no.
argument.
T-Mobile's running out of money because they have to win this auction. They're starting to just they're queuing up the bags, bro. They can't lose in this auction. I mean they're not as financially powerful as AT&T and Verizon. Verizon has taken on a lot of debt and AT&T has taken on a lot of debt. And T-Mobile, the merger was expensive and their capex has increased, and they could talk about all the synergies they want, but they simply are not as profitable as the other two. If you look at their net revenues and stuff like that, it pales in comparison to Verizon and AT&T. Like, go ahead and look at the net. The hand over fist. Look at the ARPU. Verizon's freaking over $50. I think AT&T is over $50 also. T-Mobile's coming in what, like $43 or something? I forget what the numbers are. It's been a while since I looked, but they're way behind. They simply can't command the money. I mean, they've got a bunch of free lines and they sell their lines a little cheaper. Things have improved a little bit because of Magenta MAX, but that's all you can really say. Most of their customers are not on Magenta MAX. Most of their customers are still on T-Mobile One lines and Magenta. I mean, people are getting freaking essentials, Dennis, for heaven's sake. They're getting people are signing up for essentials, dog. Which is crazy.
It's a real shame for both T-Mobile and the consumer.
All right, man. Let's get to the super chat here from Green. Very impressed by AT&T's 5G Plus, considering it's only 40 megahertz of spectrum. When will they deploy the rest and we'll be able to get close to the performance of millimeter wave when fully deployed? So to address the millimeter wave comparison, that's never going to happen. Millimeter wave channels are just so daggone deep and wide. Most millimeter wave applications are like 400 megahertz, 800 megahertz. So until that day comes where each carrier has that in midband, that's not going to happen. And they'll definitely need a bunch of carrier aggregation to do that. Also, with AT&T's 5G Plus being 40 megahertz and them getting more, the next step you're going to see is going to be the combination of the two frequencies, the 3.7, which is live now, and then once they get radio gear up, that can actually do the 3.45 as well, then you'll see the additional spectrum. So that'll be 40 and then 40, which gives you 80 megahertz. So that'll essentially double the speed you're seeing now. And then in terms of next year, when they can actually put up gear that can utilize all the spectrum, you're looking at bandwidth, they're going to have 80 to 100 megahertz. And I think Green's actually in a market where AT&T might have 100 of the 3.7. So that would be 140 megahertz. That would be very, very nice. But we'll need standalone 5G for that. You won't be able to do that on NSA.
Hey, Sneed, slightly off topic question, but I'm just curious. When 5G standalone cores become the de facto for all three carriers, how much spectrum do you see being left behind for LTE use cases?
Leave the LTE alone. For the first year, leave the LTE alone. Year 2, I think you could start taking away certain things. And I think DSS probably becomes a little more commonplace, meaning you'll have probably 2 DSS channels for each carrier. With the exception of T-Mobile, I don't think they want to DSS anything. But like I could see Verizon DSSing N66 and N2 and N5 or whatever. Yeah, they got N5 here. I could see AT&T DSSing band 12, maybe also band 14, depending on the whole FirstNet situation. But I can see them also DSSing band 2, band 66, and like maybe N29. Like we're gonna see some new DSS stuff, which is not exciting, but I could see some of that.
So Zero Cool saying no more DSS gens due to 5G standalone core.
Hey, I hope I'm wrong. I hate DSS. It has not worked out for anyone. DSS is terrible in its current iteration. It decreases, the performance. And, me and Zero Cool have talked about this. The problem in most instances is the channels haven't been wide enough to really warrant the DSS anyways. I mean, look, Dennis, the problem is you're still going to have a lot of traffic on LTE in a lot of places. So you're going to kind of see some of that sunsetting is going to have to wait. People still on the LT network. LT is still carrying a lot of traffic. I mean, if the LT network is carrying 40% of the data traffic, how do you shut stuff down? You don't, right? Now, if it starts to decrease to like 30, 25% of traffic, yeah, I could see you refarming stuff completely over to 5G. What do you think, Dennis? We see, a complete move of N66 to just a dedicated 5G channel within, I don't know, by 2025 or something?
I mean, this is the way I predict it going, in my personal opinion, Sneed. I see it going kind of like what happened when LTE came out and HSPA Plus was a thing. And by that, I mean AT&T and Verizon, they might leave like 5, 10 megahertz on LTE, just total. And the rest just gets refarmed and put on standalone 5G.
And this is a really good statement here. I don't know if you caught this one. This one is from Makeo. This is really good. This is a question a lot of people are asking, and I have a really simple answer for you. He says, or asks, what year should we look at buying a more future-proof phone to be able to make use of all the Spectra and Spectrum combinations? There will never come a time where you can future-proof a phone. You literally, if you want to stay on the bleeding edge, cutting edge of all these technologies, you have to upgrade annually. Because every year there's going to be some new carrier aggregation combination, some new frequency, something from like the actual antenna, modem, whatever. There's going to be new stuff every year. So this day will never come where you can buy a phone that is future proofed for more than 1 year. So for example, you buy this model year iPhone, the next iPhone will have something new from a cellular standpoint. And here's how I know this, Makeo. Just look at the precedents. In 2016, you were talking about getting a phone for T-Mobile that was going to have N71, right? Your next phone had to have N71. It's a coverage band and blah, blah, blah. In 2020, now I need an N41 phone. Well, what happened in those 4 years? A merger? A Spectrum auction? Like, things happen literally every 2-3 years that are so big. If you don't upgrade the device within 2 to 3 years, you're like in the Stone Age. Like, if you don't have an N71 device right now, why would you even be on T-Mobile, right? If you don't have an N41 device, well, you must be happy not having a capacitive experience on T-Mobile because all their assets are going into 5G and especially N41. For Verizon, if you bought your phone in 2015, you not only don't have, you might not have an AWS phone, possibly, I guess, but you don't have millimeter wave 5G, you don't have C-band, you don't have CBRS, you don't have any of that stuff. Like, these upgrades, if you're going to properly have the most connectivity that each carrier offers, you literally have to upgrade annually. And if you don't upgrade annually, you probably should be upgrading every 2 years because so much can change in that time.
Sneed, I do want to add just one thing though. I generally agree with what you're saying, but to a minor extent, I do feel like once the technology has become more matured, so on the tail end of LTE, right? The difference between phones didn't matter as much because the wireless chipsets were generally ahead of their time. By that I mean like when Galaxy S8 came out, I think it supported like 5-way carrier aggregation, I believe,
And no
out the
carrier was doing it, right?
right. And it already supported 4x4 MIMO, and at the time, no carrier was doing it until like 2 years later. The only thing it was missing, I believe, was band 71 for T-Mobile, but that's because of the auction. But for like everybody else, like you were still good. Like you still had bands 2, 4, 12, 66, which were like your most important ones. And the Galaxy S9 Plus rectified and added like another carrier aggregation and band 71 for you the following year. So like there are certain circumstances where it matters less, I would say, but generally speaking, your statement rings true. Like there will always be some enhancement. It might be a battery efficiency enhancement, it might be a range enhancement, it might just be support for a new band or better use case of those carrier aggregations or whatever. But it doesn't, like, the point where if you're trying to quote unquote future proof, I'm using like figurative quotation marks here, only really happens at the end when it doesn't matter. And now we're on the tailspin of a new generation of wireless technology at that point.
So this is another statement from Mikhail here. He said, definitely want to avoid the debacle of AT&T not clearing phones that could use their spectrum, but they're deciding not to. So what he's discussing here is the 3.7 C-band and then the 3.45 C-band situation. That's going to be a massive problem for AT&T customers who have purchased 5G devices prior to this year, right? It's going to be a smaller problem on T-Mobile, a much smaller problem because, for them, their focus is N41. They will have N77, obviously, but that might be a problem a year or two from now. For AT&T, this could be an issue in the near future, right? If you're trying to get all their capacity access. On Verizon, there's no issue. They don't have two types of C-band frequencies. They have one, right? Like, what you're getting with Verizon. There's two questions to ask yourself if you're on Verizon if you need a new phone. Am I in a millimeter wave market? Because then you decide if you want to even bother getting a millimeter wave device. Because you can save money, actually, when buying certain phones that don't have millimeter wave antennas, right? So that's one question. The other question is, does the phone support N77? That's really all you need to know, because band 48 CBRS is probably there, so you're good. It's LTE. So these newer phones are going to have N48, the 5G version of CBRS. But like, you could see how like each carrier's in a different situation. I would be less concerned if I was a Verizon customer. I would be more concerned about future-proofing phones with AT&T. But this is the way AT&T's always been. Dennis, you remember when they got the WCS, the band 30? When they got
I
it, the
remember.
whole, yeah, like, people were like, "Oh god, now I gotta buy another phone to take advantage of this 10 megahertz of capacity?" Or when they got band 14 with FirstNet. "Oh, now I need to buy a phone that has band 14." Or what about, before that? Like, they had AWS, right? Like, every couple of years, you kinda just have to buy a new phone.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It just the way I would phrase it is it matters more than others with certain carriers. Like the best example of that would be Verizon. I would say from 2013 until about 2000, say 17, if you had a phone that had band 13 and AWS support, you were pretty much golden. You didn't really miss out on too much. Agree or
And all
disagree?
the yeah, and all the other stuff that came with it. It was like, what, band 2 and stuff, the PCS.
Right.
It was the basics. I mean, that stuff was already on air. Wasn't that was already on 2G, I think, so they just moved some of it over to
R-
LTE or whatever.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No version of the consumer ever truly winning the upgrade war. Like, it's always going to be a battle. It's always going to be, man, I just bought this phone, or man, I've only had this phone for 2 years. I kind of wanted to hold on to it for another year, but I'm missing out on a really high capacitive frequency. Like, to not have C-band, Dennis, in a market that has a good build, you're basically paying your bill to have access to that, but you can't access it. This is the
Dude,
one thing I've told people is, like, people are like, "No, I'm not upgrading my phone. I'm gonna hang on to my phone for 5 years." But by you paying your bill every month, you're paying for those upgrades and you're not gonna use them.
dude, I'm sorry, but my comment to people that want to hang on to old phones and pay Verizon pricing is to go buy a very cheap MVNO plan from US Mobile and call it a day, because you're paying
Actually, I would get Visible.
or even Visible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would go like El Cheapo Maxo, dude.
Like if you're not upgrading your phone every 2 years, get on Visible.
I mean, because it's LT network, mostly an LT network access. I think they throttle the ultra wideband, don't they?
Yeah, the 200 meg.
Yeah, so, like, you're just not into a premium experience, you're not into having a modernized premium phone. Yeah, make it as cost effective as possible. Pay as little for it, so you're essentially not paying for the upgrades, right? And I think some people are more comfortable with that anyways, keeping the cost down.
I don't like Visible though, so I'm gonna stick with my US Mobile recommendation though. I don't like Visible. I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you there. I think it's just a good recommendation to go MVNO. I think it's right. The only reason I said Visible is it's got the tethering, I suppose, but I don't know. Their accounting, they've got other issues and stuff.
Well, I mean, US Mobile $45 gets you 50 gigs of true high speed hotspot unthrottled and like 100 gigs of priority data. So
those
it's
are those are both good options. I mean, if you're just talking pricing,
yeah,
yeah, that's
but
pretty good. That's a pretty interesting topic, actually. Dennis, pretty nice there. There was one more thing I wanted to discuss quickly. I don't think this is going to matter to too many people. You guys ever heard of WOW?
yeah, the cable.
Wide Open West or whatever, the cable
Yeah,
provider?
yeah, I've heard of them.
Okay, they just launched uh 4 mobile packages. Unlimited talk and text with a mix of shared and unlimited data options. They are now officially in MVNO. I believe they're doing it through Reach Mobile, which I don't even know what that is.
Doesn't Reach use T-Mobile?
I don't know. It says here that Reach Mobile and this service is going to be available in parts of Florida and Georgia. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah.
So listen to these plans, Dennis, and tell me what you think. You ready?
Yeah.
The basic plan, which is a shared plan, unlimited talk and text, 1 gig of data, $15.
Okay,
The
that's not bad.
the line charge is $15. That's $30.
Wait, what? You said it was a shared plan. I'm sorry. You said it was
You can have 6 lines on that 1 gig shared.
yeah, for 15, right?
Yeah, 15. No, well, but there's a line charge, $15.
I'm not I'm trying to follow. So are you telling me that it's a bucket of so 1 gig of data is $15 and then you have to pay a line access charge to access your data?
Every line outside of that first line is going to be $15.
Jesus
So
H Christ, that's terrible.
so it's $15 times 6.
I thought you were saying it was like Xfinity where it's like, yeah, $15 for a gig of data, it doesn't matter how many lines. I thought that's what you were saying. Not $15 per line.
It says additional line charge is $15.
Yeah, that's
Up.
terrible.
All right, next one is the moderate plan. It's also a shared plan. Unlimited voice, unlimited text, 3 gigs of data, $25. All the line stuff stays the same.
So it's $25 plus $15 a line.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
People's Choice is the next plan. It's also a shared plan. 8 gigs of data, $35, and then $15 the line charge.
Terrible.
This one is the all-in unlimited plan, which is the only unlimited plan. It's a 20 gig of high-speed data, and then it throttles you after 20. That price is $45, and it's $40 per month if it's 2+ lines.
Terrible, but the least terrible out of the ones that you told me.
This is so bad, Dennis. What is this?
It sounds like what I looked up Reach Mobile's pricing and WoW's actually cheaper than what Reach Mobile charges. So that's saying something, I suppose, but it sounds like WoW didn't get a very good deal, and so that's being reflected here with their pricing.
Dude, so we have WoW here. They have market share, I suppose, where they run copper, and it's terrible and it's awful. And this is just another cable operator trying to get in on the festivities of being a home provider and then also selling as an MNO, or excuse me, an MVNO. But this one through Reach is interesting. Because what? Cox is T-Mobile. No, Cox is trying to be Verizon, but stuck in T-Mobile. I think Comcast, that's Verizon. The big two are Verizon, right? Spectrum and Xfinity. I mean, those are the only ones I think worth mentioning. But what the hell, man? Like, that's not even good pricing. This is terrible. I don't even know how many customers WoW has anymore. I know they sold some of their markets. to like Atlantic, which I don't even know what that is. Like, I try to keep track of all this stuff, Dennis. There's literally so many little regional operators.
Well, Sneed, let me share a little tidbit in
That's
case
like
you.
Armstrong selling Reach Mobile, dude.
Jesus Christ! Don't even give me freaking trauma memories. But listen, let me share a little nugget for you in case you didn't catch my stream yesterday on best phone plans. Um, did I tell you about how one of my sources slash Reddit leaked about Xfinity Mobile adding 5 gigs of high speed hotspot to their unlimited plan?
They just did that.
Yeah, that just happened, and customers that are being impacted are getting like email notifications or something, and basically by like July. Hold on, I'm looking at my screenshot of it here. By July 8th, all unlimited customers on Xfinity Mobile will be migrated to the updated plan that now includes 5 gigs of hotspot, high speed.
Do we know any people that have Xfinity Mobile?
You joking? You.
I'll be ready to try that out. What does the line have now?
Well, before it was just hotspot was just capped at 600 kilobits per second, just period,
All
unless
time.
all time, unless you were on ultra wideband.
Then it's all systems a go.
Yeah. Now you get 5 gigs of high speed, like uncapped hotspot when you're on like LT, for example, and it's still all systems to go when you're on ultra wideband.
Huh.
So it's a small but significant improvement. Like 5 gigs is not a lot, but
it gives you something usable in some situations.
correct in a pinch.
Right, connecting an iPad or something for a kid or whatever.
Or I was just more so thinking like if you're in a pinch and need to do some stuff on your computer, like send some emails, do some basic web browsing, just do whatever in a pinch. It's way better than 600 kilobits per second, which I would argue is borderline not usable.
I personally believe there should not be a smartphone plan on this planet that doesn't include at least 3 gigs of tethering and hotspot data.
Oh, you're being kind.
The reason I say 3 is because that would account for possibly 2 or 3 times a month where somebody might use a gig. You get what I'm saying, Dennis?
Yeah, I was actually going to go on the opposite end of the spectrum. In my ideal world, I don't think there should be a hotspot plan on the planet that doesn't include 15 gigs of hotspot.
I think any postpaid plan, I think you're right. I think on a prepaid plan, they could be a little bit less. I don't know. Kind of depends.
Or arguably, I would go one other different route. I feel like the 600 kilobit per second speed throttle should be eliminated, and the new speed throttle in this world of supposedly infinite capacity should be bumped up to 3 meg.
Nah, let's make it 5 meg. Let's get 1080p video in there.
Yeah.
I like 1080p, Dennis.
5 meg is barely. 8 meg would actually be true 1080p. Like in all scenarios, 8 meg is where you'd want to be at, but sure.
So I've tested this with each of the major carriers. 5 megabits per second will get you 1080p on all 3. I don't know about, long term or whatever, because I guess you could have some inconsistencies, but Verizon, you can get 1080p on 4 meg, so like that I've seen. AT&T, I've never had any issues. T-Mobile, same thing. You can get it.
Hey, side note real quick. I was looking up WoW Cable, and when I clicked on Cleveland, apparently they're owned by Breezeline because that's where I got rerouted to.
Okay, so that's new. They used to be like WoW branded.
Yeah, so apparently in Cleveland it's like owned by Breezeline, which I never heard of. But long story short, apparently they're trying something out that I think is kind of interesting. I've never really seen this before, but apparently you for a limited time you can try out any speed tier for just $30 a month for 6 months. So you get to kind of experiment with what internet speed works best for you. I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on this as a concept for home internet providers where they're kind of like, hey, we'll give you the lowest price so you can figure out your needs and you just keep that?
That's pretty nice.
That's actually pretty innovative in my opinion. And I never thought I would say that about WoW freaking Cable of all cable operators.
So then after that little window, if you wanted to keep the 500 meg, you would go to the regular retail price, which could be $60 or
Everyday
something.
price after promotion is $60.
Yeah. Okay.
That's actually not a bad price point. $60 for 500 meg is very fair, I would
Do you
say.
see an uplink, or did they mention any of that?
They don't mention an uplink that I can see. I'm assuming that I would need an address to actually start finding out what that would be. But even their gig,
They're like traditional cable ISP. It's going to be like 20 or 30 meg.
but even their gig is only $70. That's actually cheaper than everyone that I could think of off the rip.
Like
Fios,
Comcast or whatever.
yeah, like Fios, Comcast. Like, I mean, if we start talking about mobile discounts, then obviously it's a different story. But if we're just talking about gig internet pricing, like this is cheaper than Fios and Comcast and Spectrum.
I definitely like that structure though, saying, "Hey, try this out. Just, pay us whatever, $30 is fair, and then make a decision. Do you want to keep what you got? Here's the price."
I
Yeah.
actually love it. I think this pretty uncable-esque in nature.
Well, wouldn't a wireless company also like be better served doing something like this? Like you think about like the Mobile X concept, right? Like how, it's more transparent and more clear and people know what they're getting or whatever,
Dude,
like
how sick would that be? How sick would that be if like AT&T or someone said, "Hey, your first month we'll give you this introductory rate, and based off your usage, we'll recommend which unlimited plan you should be on. If you need the elite, or if you need the extra, if you could be fine with like starter or whatever."
the problem is like the wireless providers all work the same way. They want you on an unlimited plan and they want you to pay for more than what you're using.
Yeah, but all the plans I just mentioned are all unlimited. The difference being is that they're still going to get you on an unlimited plan regardless, but at least then they could be like, we noticed that your usage isn't a lot of video consumption, so you should be fine with this 40p video throttle type of deal. Like, you don't need Elite for 4K video streaming, or vice versa.
The way I look at the wireless providers, though, is they're like the definition of trying to cloud the judgment of the wireless customer. Like they want you in the dark. They don't want you understanding anything. Look at the terminology, look at the fees, look at the all the charges. It's all like masked, like T-Mobile doesn't want to touch any of their plans cuz they'd get sued by the DOJ. So what they do? Like change pricing structure and fees on other stuff. Like Verizon literally is like the worst. Like economic recovery fees and all this. They literally don't want you to know what's going on, right? This company is probably trying to break through. You know what I'm saying, Dennis? They're trying to get in where I would bet you Spectrum is probably their biggest competitor. Maybe AT&T, but I would say probably Spectrum. Because would Spectrum do this?
Wait, you talking about what WoW's doing? Or
Yeah.
Breezeline, excuse me?
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't see Spectrum doing this. In fact, Spectrum's worse than Comcast, apparently, when it comes to internet pricing. So yeah, no, I could not see Spectrum doing this.
Yeah, they're probably just trying to break through in these places to get some market share, and they just don't have a lot of customers.
Well, I was giving them my praises until I answered their 3 little questionnaire. Let me share my screen real quick because this really irks me when ISPs have these questions that don't make any sense. So I'm sharing my screen again real quick. If you can just put it on screen. All right. Look at these questions. Not sure what speed you need? We've got you. All right. So, Sneed, how does your household use the internet? Light user, email/web browsing. Moderate user, light plus video streaming video and video calling. A heavy user is someone that is moderate plus work/school from home or online gaming. Really? That's basically everyone. So let's click heavy user, right?
That means they want everybody going there.
All right. So hit next. How many people use the internet in your home? I clicked 1. So let's just do that, right? Because I don't even want to click on 4+. Let's just do 1. So 1 person. And then how big is my home? Why the fuck does this matter for my speed tier? What? How big is my home? Well, I clicked on this one because I feel like this is the most. Well, first off, that's what my house is like, but also this is the most common, right? So there we go. Let's see the results. They recommend 500 meg. Nothing about what was asked here actually determines like how does ideal for 15 to 18 devices match up with what any of these questions like lined up for like what?
Well, why don't we change one of those inputs and see what it does?
Sure. All right, so I
All
just
right,
refreshed it. All right, let's change the input. What do you want me to change? Just so heavy user still?
heavy user.
Okay.
Let's go 3 people,
Okay.
same as the other things, whatever you chose.
And I did 1,000 to 3,000 square foot.
Okay.
Recommended gig. I knew it would if I clicked on more people. All right, let's do this one more time though, because I want to see if it'll actually recommend a smaller tier. So we're gonna do heavy user. We'll do one person, but I'm gonna do 3,000 square foot house. See if that makes a difference. Okay, they still recommended 500 meg. All right. I just want to do this one more time. And if the audience wants to mention a suggestion, please do so. How about heavy user, one person, and then 1,000 square foot, less than 1,000. Let's see if it makes a difference. And they still recommend 500. So I don't understand how the size of the house makes
So
it.
it's power user that's dictating if you get 500 and 1 gig.
No, the difference was the amount of people when I picked heavy user. When it's one user, they recommend 500. When it was 3 people, they recommended gig.
Right, but they're either recommending 500 or a gig is what I'm saying.
Okay, well, what if
As
I
long as
do
you're saying power user, so I think if you lighten up
moderate
and
user?
choose moderate, yeah, I think they're gonna start you out at 300 or whatever their lower one is with one person, and if you change it to multi people, it'll take you to 500.
Yeah, so the next tier town was down 200, so they gave me that.
Uh-huh. Now change it to what, 3 people or whatever,
Okay,
and they'll probably bump you up to 500, right?
let's see. 3 people.
I'd be shocked if they told you to get gigabit speed. Come on, man.
500. Yeah, they did 500 meg. I I I'm just curious real fast. I'm really really curious. I'm going to do light user, which is just email and web browsing. But I'm
What's
going
their
to do
lowest plan? What do they offer?
lowest plan is 100 meg.
Okay, if they tell you anything other than 100 meg, it's an upsell.
All right, so I did light user. I'm going to do 3 people though cuz I feel like that's a common family. And I'm
Oh,
going to
they're
do
gonna tell you 500.
200.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's still ridiculous considering that the only thing I'm doing is emailing and web browsing. 50 meg would have been plenty. Like
Well, they like the most important thing, and they're not telling you or recommending this, is are you gonna be streaming TV?
well, that
Like,
was the
and how
streaming
many
video. Yeah.
right, and how many TVs is it? Because if you have 3 simultaneous videos playing, and it might be like 4K Netflix, 1080p YouTube or Hulu, Disney Plus 8K, I think. Don't they do 4K or 8K on some of these apps?
8K no, 4K yes.
Okay. I mean, you're going to probably push 100 megabits required for those 3 or 4 TVs.
Can I just say a bigger thing that I feel like is a missed opportunity? When they ask how big my house is, considering that most people connect via Wi-Fi, I think it's a perfect opportunity to recommend a mesh setup or some extenders.
Well, that's the question about the size of the house is more about hardware and less about the plan.
Right, but they don't do anything with it. Like it's not like they're like, "Hey, we think you would like this with our rental plus extender combo or something." You get what I'm saying? Like they're not pushing any hardware. That's the point, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think they're kind of not giving people enough credit to understand like what would be needed for a larger home.
Well, most
Like you would
people
need
wouldn't
additional access points or whatever.
well, most people wouldn't necessarily understand that. But you, the ISP, can understand that if this person has a 10,000 square foot house, your single crappy gateway isn't going to provide good Wi-Fi coverage for that person's home.
And then
You-
again, the capacity of the plan makes no difference on that.
right. And then the person's going to be calling you, wasting your precious customer service time that you're paying to complain about how their Wi-Fi is slow because they can't get it in like the other bedroom in their house or something. Oh, dude,
Weird.
Andrew's on the mark. This is like one of those family style restaurants that overestimates how much food the table needs. 3 people must need 7 pasta dishes.
That's terrible math.
Also, how big are emails? 200 MB? Question mark. Dude, emails are like, I think the typical email is like 5 megabytes or less.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm pretty sure that that's what most of it is. And if it's text only, tiny, man.
I think
Thanks, Murphy. Appreciate the super chat, bud.
in fact, fun fact, a lot of email clients that are still in use today actually cap out at 10 megabytes being sent because they use like crappy like webmail servers. Even Google, like if you want to send something that's like bigger than 10 megabytes, I think oftentimes it recommends sharing a link to Google Drive. It doesn't actually come as a specific thing within like the email itself as an attachment. So emails are pretty small in nature.
Hey, I want to give a big shout out to EM Tech, who is literally stuck doing nothing for the next several hours. And he was happy that we were doing the live stream, but this live stream is coming to an end. So sorry, man. You're going to have to like listen to music or watch a movie or something. All right. Because I'm tired and I'm sure Dennis is tired and I got work tomorrow. Dennis, I know you're off, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to start our weekend, as should you. You guys are amazing.
Actually, I will make a quick shout out real fast.
Oh, go ahead, man.
I'll actually be doing a live stream tomorrow on Technoid's channel, if you remember Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I said his channel name, right?
Yeah, Technoid.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure you went like like in a weird way. Yeah, I'll be doing a live stream on Technoid's channel, so that'll be fun. If you're really really bored, I recommend checking him out. I'll be there as a guest.
I'll try to be there too. Let me know that he was going to be going live, and that would be sweet if I can get on there. I should be able to get there.
Yeah, it's tomorrow. I'm checking my Twitter. I believe it's tomorrow at 8. Yeah, tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Yeah, 8 p.m. That's right, brother. Big shout out to everybody here who was here during the live. So hashtag 2Live Crew and everybody on replay, hashtag replay crew. Let's do some hashtags. Hashtag Ravioli Gang, hashtag Mod Squad, hashtag Help the Bear, hashtag Save the Bear. Let's do, I'm forgetting one, man. What am I forgetting? I wish Pete was here. He'd remember. Anyways, big shout out to Dennis. Best Phone Plans Podcast. Yesterday's show was really good. Appreciate that, Dennis. It was really nice. And I don't know. I'm probably, for all the patrons out there, we're probably not going to have a Sunday live stream. We're probably going to have to do it Monday, which actually might work to our favor. I'll try to get Dennis on there. We'll send it out to some of the Patreon supporters and see if we can get it in Monday. So, but yeah, it's going to be a busy week for me. We got some things going on and stuff. So, but I will be around and you guys will still have content. I got a bunch of stuff I got to release. I got a bunch of stuff ready to go.
Hey,
So,
one more thing before you end the stream, Sneed.
Yeah.
Because I got to ask you, can we get a status update on your US Mobile, Xfinity Mobile, Verizon testing? Because you had that whole
Yeah. Yeah, US Mobile's done, dude. It's not good. I don't like it. It's not good. The Xfinity Mobile has been good. So I've got some more testing to do, and I got to do some filming. I do have a couple of videos I'm going to post here in the next couple of
but
probably
the
one
5
this
meg
week and one next
upload,
week.
the 5 meg upload thing that you were talking about is what I want to specifically know.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's happening. I'm going to test Xfinity Mobile a little bit. I want to try it over Ultrawide band, and I want to try it over LTE and compare it, and then I'll have kind of a more definitive answer on what's going on.
Okay. I'll let you go to bed. In the meantime, y'all, love you. Thank you for the support. And that is a peace out from me.
We out.